All right, welcome everybody. This is part 4 of our year-end webinar series. This one is Get Your Inventory Ready for Year-End, part 2. So it's part 4 of the series, but part 2 of inventory readiness. And this one is the big count method. Our presenter today is Scott Rockins from Windward Professional Services. Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Kyle, and thank you everyone for coming. So today, just for a quick review, these are the topics we've covered so far. We've talked about dealing with your day-end procedures, dealing with your inventory ledger and your stock inventory, which relates to this conversation today. And last week, we talked about how to use scanners. So although they're bound to come up in the conversation, the conversation about scanners, if you missed that, would be in the recording from last week. Today, we're going to talk about how you count with paper and also how you complete the count, whether you used paper or you use scanners. Or actually, this would be the same if you hired someone to count your inventory as well, like a third-party company. The last step of it will go the same no matter which approach you use. So there'll be a little bit of review if you were here last week on how to build a counting list or a count batch. And then we'll dive into how to kind of finish things up. Next week, we'll do some custom reporting that can help you grab the data out of System 5. Our objectives for today's presentation are, number one, to understand count batches. And I'm going to go through some of the common misunderstandings and misconceptions with organizing your count into a batch and processing that batch. Different ways you can sort or filter it, depending on your business and your workflows, what makes sense for you. Also, I'm going to encourage you to use your variance report, which we'll review, to determine how close you are when you count. So how accurate your stock is to your count at year end. And we'll talk about the accounting effect of your inventory count once you process it. So we'll cover all these topics, and we'll probably end up running into a couple of little gotchas that you're likely to run into in your count, such as the pesky yellow lines you see when you process your batch. So this is what I'd like to encourage you to do when you count this year or this quarter or this month, is keep track of how many pieces you counted or how many dollars you counted, as you prefer, and how many pieces or how many dollars System 5 told you you would have. So your expected versus your actual. And keep that as a KPI year over year, or if you do this more frequently, month over month, and try and optimize that as much as you can. Use it as a guiding factor to help you keep an accurate inventory. So the first concept we're going to go through is the count batch. So this is the list of things you're going to count. And I think at this stage, we're going to jump right into System 5, and I'll just show you exactly what I mean. So if you're using the inventory counting tool, first of all, where you find it, in case you're new, is here under Inventory and Purchases and Physical Inventory Count, right here. Now, the first step that you do, whether you're counting with scanners, counting with paper, or even if you've hired a third-party company to count on your behalf, in any of these scenarios, the first thing that you do right before you count, and not long before you count, immediately before you count, is create the master list, which we call a count batch. And to do that, you click the New button right here. I'm going to make a new one right now, but for demonstration purposes, I'm also going to use the one I created last week. And I can filter, I can give this a name here, although I find the date is really quite helpful. I can filter it by department if that's something I need to do. And most of the time, unless you're brand new, you're doing a periodic stock count, which means the system will tell you what it expects to find, and then you'll go count what you did find, and we'll compare the two. An uninitialized stock count is used if you've never used the system before, or if you're restarting your data, and the system won't tell you what it expects. you just tell it what you find and it adjusts. So this is more rare, the uninitialized stock count. So we're gonna do a periodic. Now, before I hit this build button, I may want to review some of the options and filters I can use to choose which inventory I'm going to count. Both which types of products or which vendors of products, and specifically how much of it, depending on how your business is organized. And a lot of this has to do with how you stage customers' product for delivery or pickup when it's reserved. Are you counting the stuff that's reserved is a big topic here. So let's just look through these options here. Now this, for those of you that were here last week, this is a little bit of review. Here we can see a lot of toggles that you might use to determine which inventory it is you're going to count. I'd say the second one here is a very common decision point for many different businesses. Am I counting the stock that's on work orders? So for most people, that's product that is reserved for customers. Am I excluding that, meaning it's in a separate area of my warehouse, staged for delivery or pickup, and I'm not going to count it? Or is it mixed in with my regular stock and I need to untick this box and then make sure I count it? So if you want to make sure you get that right, probably the best thing to do, well, it depends on your workflows. If you stage your orders for delivery, then you're going to just decide whether you're going to count them or leave them out of it. It's the same with special order stock, that usually the two go together. It's the same with RMAs. So in case you use different terminology, what we're talking about here is warranty product that's going back to the vendor. Are you counting that as part of your count or excluding that because it's in a separate area of your warehouse or showroom? And stock marked for deletion, similar. Those are discontinued products, but you may still have them. So you may want to count them. Those are all very common. A couple other filters here that may come up for you are the include oversold button. So if you have oversolds, and I actually would like to know this. I would like to know this. So I'm just going to run a quick poll here, just so I know how much time to spend on this today. So let me know if you do oversell often. Okay. Oops, pardon me. So most of you do, so we'll spend a little time on the oversolds. If you oversell, then most likely what you're going to want here is to leave this ticked off, like blank, leave it blank, so we can get rid of those oversolds for you. I'll show you that. I'm going to tick it on here to just show you the difference. So we'll make a couple lists real quick. And you may also, if you use the toggles, for example, exclude stock on work orders, and then you may want to run a second batch after you run the first one to exclude items from other batches. So you can have two batches at once, but most of the time you want a batch that includes everything you're going to count. In my first example, I'll show you what happens if you tick include oversold. You can also use a filter. The most common filter people use would be either filter by categories of product, and this is a good way to cycle count. I'll count my furniture in January and my appliances in February, for example. Creates shorter lists, but of course not of all product. You can also filter by supplier. If your showroom or warehouse is organized by supplier, that makes sense. Same with brand. And if you do use location codes, then you can filter by location codes by typing in the start and end code. That's a little bit less frequent. I see people doing that. So I'm just going to run an unfiltered batch, but I will, just for demonstrations, include the oversold here. I'm just going to hit build. Now, hitting that build button is an important step. And the reason it's an important step is at that point in time, Windward takes a snapshot of your inventory data and puts it on this list. So at this point in time, when I hit build, it believes that I had these 21 old antique recliners. And when I process my batch later, if I put a different number here, it's going to backdate that inventory quantity to the current point in time, which means it's very important you hit the build button right before you go count, and that no more sales or receiving happens while you're counting. However, as far as typing in the 19 there, like I just did, that can happen 2 or 3 days later, and it will backdate it to the current point in time when you hit build. And that's a little bit of a common misconception. What you don't want to do is count and then hit build. You want to hit build and then count. So in this example, I'm going to just sort here because I did include oversolds. So when you include oversolds, when you tick that box, then you will see this on your count. And that's going to affect a lot of you. Now, if I were to put a 1 here, what you can see is the system's going to adjust for that oversold. If I say I have 1, it's actually going to add 2 to stock to overcome the oversolds. And that may not be what you want. The alternative to this is to not include the oversolds, in which case this same number would put just 1 into stock. The only way for me to really demonstrate that is to show you. So I'm going to save this batch, and then very quickly, I'm going to close right out, and I'm going to build another batch. Except this time I'll leave this off. And I think for the majority of you, you'll want this unticked.
Hey, Scott, there's a question that's kind of timely right now. The question was, why would you need to do another batch on the same product?
You wouldn't do, oh, thank you for the question. Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Katja. So usually people do 2 batches when they're doing something like this. The first batch excludes all product on work orders. Then they create another batch right afterwards that has that unticked, and then that batch would represent all product on work orders. So this gives you 2 separate lists, one of the product that's not reserved for customers and one that is. That's the most common example of why you'd use 2. That's the only one I've actually seen, 2 batches.
So what about if you have multiple locations for an item within a warehouse and you're just scanning a section at a time and making those batches, or is that a different use case there?
That's a good question, Kyle, and that's probably a common misunderstanding there. So if a product is on your batch, then you need to count it in all locations when you do that. So that is something that normally, say you have a product that's on your showroom floor and in your warehouse in 2 spots. Typically that's done if you're using scanners with separate scan batches that all add into the primary count batch. But let's say you have that same scenario and you're not using scanners. If I have, say, these dark green recliners here, these 21 of them, if they're on a batch, I suppose if I had, say, 10 on work orders and 11 in my regular inventory, then if I excluded the work orders, here it would be asking me to count the 10, and then my second batch would ask me to count the 11. Does that make sense? It's a little tricky to verbally say, I guess. Most of the people I help, they run 1 batch. And include the work orders, count everything, or exclude them and just go verify that the work orders have the correct amount set aside. I see the other question there. Thanks, Glenn. How do you open a previously saved count batch? Well, I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to close this batch. And if I want to find a count batch, I go click the binoculars up here. And here's the different count batches. For the demonstration, the latter part of our demonstration today, I am going to use the count batch I created last week because it's got some stuff filled in for us. So that's number 9. You can see the date. So the date and time is usually a good indication of which one you want to use. You just double click there. And here's my count batch from last week's webinar. So from here, you can see what happens if I do not click the oversold button, because I didn't when I built this batch. So you can see that even if I look at the oversold product, here it is. Oh, sorry, this isn't the oversold product. Let me go one more time. You can see that it doesn't include it here. So even if this product is oversold, it will just adjust it to the number that I want it to be. The product's still on the list. It's just not including the oversold difference. So this one's actually oversold by 1. However, it's not adjusting it by 2 when I put 1 to stock, just by 1. Yes, Wanda, there is a recording. We'll show you where you find those at the end. So in this example, this batch that I used from last week, this batch was created and multiple scanners were used to fill in a lot of it. What I want to show you right now is once you've created your count batch and you've counted, if you're counting on paper, sometimes you need a good way to sort this or filter this to arrange the people who are counting. So for example, you can click the column headers and print out by part number which product you want someone to count, so that when you print the pages of your count and hand them out to people, they go in order. You can also do that by category. That's a common way to go about it. Or by vendor over here on the right is a common way I've seen as well, if your goods are organized by vendor. No matter how you go about it, you hand out the counting sheets, everyone counts, and someone's typing in what they find as they come back to you. And that can take some time. So here you can see how many times you've input a count. So I was using scanners, but still it's the same with paper. I typed in a number into this area 3 different times, 4 different times, just once, like that. So after you gather everyone's count sheets and you type them all in, which is a little bit time consuming, then you're inevitably going to have some areas where you have blanks. Now these are a good hint that you might need to go and double check or that something was missed. For example, if my futons here, if no one's brought me back a count with some futons, I suspect I should send someone back to that area of my warehouse. But maybe there was 0. The system wants you to type in something to verify that you've checked, even if it's 0. Now you may have many zeros on your list, and to quickly fill them all in, you can use this 0 uncounted items tool right here. If you choose 0 only out of stock, then the system will look for anywhere there's a 0, like say right here, and it'll put a 0 there for you. So if I go 0 now, it'll whip through the whole sheet for me very quickly and fill in zeros. So that's a good thing to do as long as you really believe that that has been looked at and there was in fact none. Then you're going to have the situations where the system thinks you have 1, but you found 0 or no one's brought anything back to you. So you could send someone to double check, but once you're sure, you're going to want to change this toggle on the left to 0 all. And when I do that, even if there's a 1 here, it fills in a 0 there. So, like that. And I think the next question I'm going to address in a moment here. So you go through and fill everything in. Now, at this stage, there's a couple things we'll talk about. One is just what are the steps that you do, and second is what are the steps you do with to clear your oversolds out of the system. So first, the next step you do, and this is very important for your accounting, is before you save and process your batch, which does the stock adjustments all at once, you want to review this variance report. So you click on variance report once you think you're ready. You hit view and you review this report. And this is where we encourage you to use a KPI. Look at how many items were counted and how many were expected. So it expected me to find 537 and I only found 87, a difference of 450. So my ratio, my KPI wouldn't be very bad. I'd want to make sure that I tighten things up or go back and count again. If you've got a big red number here, chances are you missed something. It's the same with the red number on the right for the dollar adjustment. You want to make this close, or you want to kind of understand why. So you want to make sure you're comfortable with this adjustment before you process your batch, and you probably want to save a copy, either by printing it right here or by exporting it to Excel. Once you're happy with that, you're going to go back to your count entry and you're going to process the batch. Now, if you'd like to get rid of your oversolds, then you want to click this. If you want the oversolds to go away entirely, catcha, then in the first step when I build my count batch, I want to have that blank. Then when I process my count batch, I want to tick it here. That will make the oversold number in the inventory item go away. Wanda, good question. Abbreviations get everyone. What's a KPI? A KPI is a key performance indicator. Some people love them. Some people think they kill productivity and innovation, but they are very useful in keeping people in line. So it's a good way to track whether you're being effective. And I do have to apologize. I'm not going to be able to go through every scenario. So if you want to zero out the oversolds so that they go away and don't come back, you leave it unticked here and ticked there. Sorry, ticked right there. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to process this batch, assuming that I'm happy with it, because I think I'm going to get some yellow lines, and I know you guys are going to run into that. Now, I tried to process my batch. I got a warning message saying, oh, I can't because there's some errors, and it popped on some yellow lines. Now, this is one of those scenarios where there's a lot of reasons you might get a yellow line, but the most common reason is this: the system's trying to reduce the stock level below 0. And so it's stopping you from doing that. You'd have to go look at the beige love seats inventory record, which you can do by double clicking. It's trying to do a -2 adjustment. And there are not going to be 2 there for it to adjust out. So if I look at that item, there's only 1 available. Now, every item is going to have its own reason for that. That probably means that's another good reason to double check. If you're looking for a fast way to get rid of the yellow lines, here's my advice. I've done this with a few people. Right click and export this to Excel. It'll keep the yellow. Then to finish processing, just delete these lines off like that. I probably have A couple. I think I created a couple on purpose. Then I can process again. It's a big topic, guys. I'm afraid it's hard for me to go through everything. But after you process the batch and it adjusts your stock, it is very important, again, to go to the variance report and print it or export it to Excel. So we're gonna go into questions, and then Kyle's gonna give us a little walkthrough of what you might do if you're looking for a little more help. So I see the questions here. By making the oversolds go away, so say your stock quantity was -5, that will, and you count 1. So it's a difference of 6 if you think about it one way. If you put the 1 in, if you clear the oversolds, the stock value in your system will go to 1 and the oversolds will go away. If you include the oversolds and you put the 1 on there, the system will add 6 into stock to overcome your oversolds, and the oversolds will stay in the system. So either way, you have 1 available for sale, but one of them keeps track of your oversolds. I think there isn't a reason someone might want to do that, but I think most people want to just get rid of them, which means, again, just because I know this comes up with everybody and it's confusing every time, to get rid of them, leave that blank. And here in the processing of it, oops, now I've gone ahead and processed tick clear oversolds. I would suggest that this is, processing this properly is a key way to keeping your ledger in line with your inventory value. And if you're having a struggle with that, it's a good time to get some help from my department. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle to sort of wrap things up and show you some promotions that we have on products and services that might be helpful to you. And I really appreciate all of you guys coming. I hope that your year end is getting lined up well for you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I know last week this part didn't go so great because my mic wasn't working, but I think we're good, right? Right, Steph?
I hear you.
Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. So this time we do have some free resources. We hope that we were able to give you some great value today, but you might need some guidance here. So we have some free things here. So there's the quick reference guide. In the quick reference guide, there is a section for the physical inventory count. You can get to that fairly easily just by typing in windwardsoftware.com/guide. It should direct you right to there, and you can navigate to the physical inventory count command. We do have the customer care knowledge base. There is a physical inventory count strategy piece of knowledge base content there. And then there's also the Windward Learning Academy. When you get into the Windward Learning Academy, we recommend using the search by tag function. There is the function called inventory count, and there's lots of videos and stuff there that you can watch and guide you through some of these things. And of course, we do have our professional services team. Scott is a part of that team, and they have quite a few. They have a catalog of services that are already kind of pre-configured for you to choose from. We recommend starting with a business efficiency check-in. Maybe not this time of year, but first of the year is coming up. It'd be a great time to check in on how things are going. We also do custom programming where we can build you new solutions. We're able to solve unique business problems for you that may be specific to your business or your business type. And then also hour plans. So if you have a range of functionality that you want to train on, if you have a new person that you just like to get spun up, it's a great way to use up an hour plan where we can get expert advice to that person's role or that individual person. And then of course, we also do project management. And again, while we think we may have given you a whole bunch of value, we're still going to give you a little bit more. We've got a coupon right now that goes through the end of December. That is 10% off of any of our professional services. you can get to the professional services catalog by going to windwardsoftware.com/professional-services. And you can use that for even setting up Android Windward scan app. If you have a Zebra TC21 or 26, you can use that in conjunction with System 5, like was shown on last week's webinar. Or we also recommend the inventory efficiencies plan, especially if you're on this webinar, you probably have a whole lot of questions about how to do an inventory. That's exactly what this specific plan is for. Again, you can go to windwardsoftware.com/professional-services-catalog, and that'll get you right to the catalog items. And we actually have a way that you can purchase them right on our website. So you can either go to your account manager for these deals, or go to our sales.windwardsoftware.com site and use promo code webinar for an additional 10% off of the inventory efficiencies and month-end, year-end plans that we're gonna get that through tomorrow. I'm gonna show you how to get there. So this is sales.windwardsoftware.com. Here's that inventory efficiencies. You can see that we already have the 10% off. It's already pre-populating. And then once you add this to your cart, you can check out, put in your details there, and you enter the webinar coupon code. It takes an additional 10% off for you. And that one will be available for the inventory efficiencies and also the month-end, year-end plan. All right. Scott, you got any other questions that are on there?
Yeah, I was just trying to answer those by chat, but here's the closing remark I'll make is this. One question, thank you, Christine, for the question. What effect does processing the batch have? Processing the batch has an important effect. It changes your stock on hand, which is what we're up to. However, what it doesn't do, Christine and everyone else, is it does not change your accounting. The variance report I was stressing there, keep a copy of that, is what you use with the advice of your accountant or bookkeeper to adjust your ledger to be the same as your inventory value. And so just keep in mind, when I process the batch, it changes what I have on hand available for sale, but it does not make an accounting adjustment. You need to make one of those as well. And the variance report is your guide to doing that. Wanda had an excellent question as well. Is it possible for more than one person at another computer to do the data entry at the same time? So with one big count batch, no, it's not. You have the one count batch open, only one person can be editing it at the same time. Wanda, a good strategy, or a couple different strategies here, are have more than one batch. So for example, have one batch of the furniture and one batch of the appliances, one batch of the recliners and one batch of the beds. And then you have two count batches and two people can do data entry then. Or if you review the webinar from last week on scan batches and using scanners, that can help with data entry as well. The scanners themselves, and even if you use scan batches with manual data entry, it can help. But multiple count batches is probably the way to go. I'm just going to see if there's anything else trailing. Glenn's asking, thank you, Glenn. Can you import the count if you have it electronically in the count batch? Yes, it does depend a little bit on where the source of the file is, Glenn. So if it's coming from a scanner, then you have to make sure that the scanner and Windward know how to talk to each other. And if it's coming from Excel, you just need to check. It still feels like it's coming from a scanner. So you got to check in your settings to make sure that it knows which columns the data is in. So part number and quantity. For most businesses, Glenn, that's column 1 is part number, column 2 is quantity. And Joe, good question. This relates to the last one. Joe's asking, if you have a negative inventory report, do you do a journal entry to adjust the cost? And the answer is yes. You want to adjust your ledger to be the truth after your inventory count. That could mean adjusting it up or down. And again, as I'm not an accountant, or certainly not your accountant, you want to get advice from your accountant before you make that big year-end entry. And the variance report is your justification for it, really. And Marla, that's an excellent question too. Can inventory count be done by location? Yes, and there's more than one way that that's arranged. If you have departments in your software, those can indicate different locations. If you have location codes, like bin location codes, then you can arrange your count by bin location. You have to be careful though, in that if you have product in more than one spot, the system's assuming you're counting all of it. You probably want specific advice to your specific layout. So yeah, I think that's all I think we got all the questions.
Yeah, I think we're
we got
pretty
it all.
close there.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's anybody else, we can certainly follow up after the show as well.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. And next week we're going to talk about 3 key reports you can customize in System 5 to help you get data out that might be helpful in your year-end procedures. I'm going to go over specifically the design inventory report and the customer or supplier report and the invoice report. And we'll talk a little bit about Windward Intelligence, which can take your reporting sort of the next level as well.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.